Hi, my name is Michael Darough, and today I want to discuss with you my body of work, The Talk. Before I get into it, I wanted to just give you a little bit of background info on me. I did my undergraduate degree at Arizona State University, getting a degree in photography, and went on to the University of Memphis, getting a Master of Fine Arts in photography from there. Since then, I went on to teach at a small liberal arts college in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, Lycoming College, middle of nowhere, but a good school, and then taught at Baylor University for a few years. Currently, I'm an educator and practicing photographer. Before I discuss the talk, I want to get into what made me pursue the talk and how I approached photographing the talk. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and went to high school in Ferguson, Missouri. If you don't know, Ferguson, Missouri is where Mike Brown was killed in 2016. And this wasn't the start of the Black Lives Matter movement, but it was, I want to say, the straw that broke the camel's back. There was rioting, there was protests, there was a lot going on. And me being from that area, it made me realize how I could have been Mike Brown. How I could have been that individual who was profiled by the police, who could have been arrested for doing something or nothing, and could have received excessive force, which is the biggest issue that we have with policing today is excessive force, even in situations where the individuals are complying with the authorities. Even if they've done something wrong, they don't have the right to end their lives because of the color of their skin. So, seeing this and watching things in the news every day and hearing from friends, hearing from family, seeing these protests, rightfully I was upset, and I felt the need to make work about this. So initially the body of work that I did addressing this issue wasn't portraiture, it was all landscape, it was all environmental shots. So I went back home to Ferguson the day after the National Guard had left, and I just photographed the aftermath of these buildings and structures that had been destroyed by protests, that had been burnt down or demolished, graffiti, expressing positive messages around the community. So I documented those things. And again, I was living in Pennsylvania at the time. I was working on a body of work that I had continued over from graduate school. And this body of work was called Twins. So Twins, I think, really starts to feed into the talk. The talk is about these conversations that black parents have with their children. I had this talk with my mom, my dad, my grandmother. It was little things that they did and little things that they said to make me aware of my surroundings and understand the world that we live in. And the world that we live in isn't always fair. So thinking about these moments and reliving these times that I had with them and these conversations that we had together, it made me think about my Twin series. And my Twin series, I investigate my relationship with my family, with my friends, relationships I've had with different individuals over the years through two twin brothers. Now, the two twin brothers, I decided to go with that because twins run in my family. My great-grandmother, she was one of 4 sets of twins. A couple of my cousins have twins. So twins, they're a big thing in my family. So I decided to, again, explore that relationship of storytelling through twins. Now, the reason I say it connects is because when I was doing that, I was photographing myself. I was turning the lens back on me and interacting with another version of myself to create a story. And I'm doing the same thing with the Talk series. I turn the camera back on myself and photograph me in these different individuals' lives, taking on these different roles. So, it's interesting to see how one body of work might connect to another, even though visually they're different. One is color, one is black and white. One I'm using a lot of manipulation, and the other I'm in a studio environment. But what we're going to do is I've got some of my photos here. I'm going to open up this portfolio, flip through a little bit, and talk about some of the images and how they came to be. So I began this project in 2018. And what I wanted to start off with was one of the first images that I created in the series. And I say one of the first images as if I didn't mess up a lot. I went through a couple different versions of this project before I started it, before I got to a good place with it. But this image right here is called Remembering Gordon. So I based this image off of a old historic photograph of an individual named Whipped Peter, or Gordon as he was known. He was an escaped slave back in 1863, and his back is turned towards us, and all you see is the marks on his back, the lashes, the scars that he bears from his time in captivity. And I thought that was appropriate in terms of thinking about today's culture and thinking about how we got to where we are today. So, systemic racism isn't a new concept. It is something that is rooted in the history of America, and unfortunately, that is what has contributed to where we are today. It is the starting point. So I knew that I had to go back into history a little bit, even though I'm addressing a contemporary issue. And again, this is one of the first images that I created in the series. It's not an exact replica of Gordon, but he has his back turned to us. It's a very close-up shot. We actually see a little bit more profile, even though my head is completely turned away from us. Yeah, that's just pretty much, that's where I started off with this image. This image is based off of a situation that was taking place in 2018 as well. And this is Stephen Clark. Stephen Clark was killed in Sacramento, California in his backyard while using a cell phone. And what I wanted to do with all of these images is I wanted to strip away the background. I wanted to make it as minimalistic as possible and bring the figure into the space so that we're focused on them. In each situation, the back is always present. I did this for two different reasons. One, I wanted to make this group of images as ambiguous as possible as to who the figure was. Yes, it's me in every single image, and yes, you can tell it's the same person, but if you're looking at my face, you associate it with me. So I wanted to make this about anybody. This could be me. This could be, your brother, your cousin, your neighbor, anybody. So yeah, that is why I make the figures ambiguous. And again, using this minimalistic background helps you just focus on the individual, the changes in the clothing, the style of dress, give you a sense of a time period, as well as drawing your attention to some of the items that they might be holding, because those are generally key factors in some of these arrests. Most of the situations, an individual is not holding a weapon of any kind. In this case, he was holding a cell phone, and that's what this image is titled. It was a cell phone. So we see this glowing cell phone in his right hand. It's very difficult to mistake a gun and a cell phone, so I wanted to make sure that that was present. This image right here, this one right here is based off of Botham John, who was killed in Dallas, Texas in 2018 as well. And he was killed within his own apartment. So, it's frustrating to know that, yeah, you can go out in the street and you can look a certain way, you can dress a certain way, you can fit the description more or less of the perpetrator that they're looking for, or you can be in a shirt and tie and fit society standards and still be stopped. This one was frustrating me because this individual, again, was sitting in his home. A police officer walked in. She believed that it was her apartment, which I don't understand how you can confuse your place, another person's place. She drew her gun and she shot him multiple times. So I took this image, putting myself on a couch, as if you're relaxing at home, again, still facing away from the camera, and yeah. This image right here, I believe is very fitting in today's context. I titled this one, I Can't Breathe. And this was shot, I believe, in 2019. And, those words, I can't breathe, This is a photograph representing Eric Gardner, who was killed in New York City selling loose cigarettes. And as he laid there in a chokehold, he uttered the words, "I can't breathe." Fast forward to 2020, and we heard those same words. We heard those same words very recently as a police officer placed his knee on the neck of a black man in the street, and he said, "I can't breathe." So this is a cycle. This is a pattern that will repeat itself if we do not make change, if we do not take to the streets and march and protest, if we do not go to our government officials and demand justice, if we do not enact legislation. These individuals are not the only ones. There are so many other cases. But again, this right here was titled "I Can't Breathe." And as I mentioned before, the items that sometimes relate to the individuals are present in his hand. So you'll see there's the cigarettes right here. And I try to keep them very consistent in terms of the look. The body language is going to shift because that's the only thing I can do. I switch up the clothing, usually to monochromatic colors, whites and blacks and degrees of gray, so I can have a play with light and shadow and tone as you look throughout the image. This right here just is based off of the rhetoric of individuals marching and protesting. So this was "Hands up, don't shoot." So that message that was being disseminated across the country became the slogan. It became the anthem for many years. So I wanted to make an image dealing with that as well. And not all images are based upon a single figure. Some of the photos that I'm shooting are just based on situations. And as I mentioned on the last image, the rhetoric of "hands up, don't shoot," the language that people are using, this one is titled "Hands on your head, lock your fingers." So as I'm looking through the media, as I'm looking through the news, I hear different things that are being said to these individuals or being said by those individuals, and I'm writing down that language, I'm jotting down notes and trying to make sure that it represents the situation and the times as best as possible. So again, "hands on your head, lock your fingers" is just the language you might hear a police officer saying to an individual. So yeah, these images are, they're sad to a degree. As I go into the studio, I will shoot these and I'll reshoot them and I'll reshoot them again because making mistakes is part of the art making process. But as I'm thinking about these, I'm sitting there with my laptop. I'm looking at articles that I saved. I'm looking at news. I'm looking at the clothing that individuals were wearing. And I'm trying to put myself in this mindset because I am a black man in America making work about what is going on in America. And I want this to be very clear. I'm not a black artist making work about a black issue. I'm making work about an American issue right now. This is a systemic problem that we need to address, we need to fix as soon as possible. So again, the style of the clothing is very similar to the others because I am just playing off of light and shadow. I'm thinking about compositions. I'm thinking about how light is going to fall on me and the best way in which that light is going to direct your eye towards what I want you to be focused on. And again, in many cases, it's the hands because that is something that I can use to inject a new facet of the composition. And this might not look like much of anything, but I felt that these images right here were a necessary part of the story. So when I'm making these images, I frequently take a lot of photos that are just of negative space. And that negative space represents the stories that we don't hear. It represents the individuals who lose their voice in the shuffle of everything else going on in the world. So, there was the Ahmaud Arbery case that came out earlier this year. I want to say it was in March that we found out about it. And I say found out because it had taken place months prior. If it had never reached national attention, he would have just been another name lost in the shuffle. Or a name that wasn't even lost in the shuffle. It was just a name that was lost. It was never spoken. It was never said. And we can't say their names if we don't know we need to. So with that in mind, I wanted to create these images that were completely blank to represent those people, to represent the lives lost unnecessarily, and never get justice or never have their opportunity to even seek justice. So this is an ongoing body of work. I don't know exactly when it will stop, when I will finish shooting. Unfortunately, I don't see things changing in the next week, in the next month, possibly not in the next year. So I'm going to continue to make this work and put it out there and allow individuals to have the conversation, because if you're not having the conversation, you're not having the talk, then it's not going to fix the problem. This historically was a conversation that people of color had at their kitchen table. It's a conversation that they had when they're in their cars driving someplace and they see someone being pulled over, or they hear stories about family members or friends of theirs. It's a conversation that you had for awareness, so that you were conscious of your place in the world and how to navigate it. But now I believe, due to social media, due to the digital age, this is a conversation that is not just being had with black and brown people. It's being had with every demographic because it's in our face. It's in the news. So that white parent who is cognizant of their privilege. We all have varying degrees of privilege, but white privilege is a thing, and they're recognizing their privilege, and they sit down with their children. They say, look, this country was founded on slavery, it was founded on oppression, but it doesn't have to stay that way. Your friend down the street might have these struggles that they face that you will never face. They might have to deal with this situation that you might not ever have to deal with. But having this awareness and standing up for these individuals and being an ally and an advocate is the starting point to help create real change in this country. And that's what I'm hoping that my work is doing. It's, again, drawing attention to this issue. And in that attempt, creating change, making people have conversations, making people feel uncomfortable. I have no problem having an individual feel uncomfortable with this work. In fact, I encourage them to look within themselves and see, are there any racist feelings, any racist thoughts, any biases they might have, and start to shift those. And I've had conversations prior to creating this work with individuals and since creating this work that have been beneficial to me and beneficial to them. So I will continue to create this work. I'm grateful for the opportunity to take just a few minutes and speak to you about this body of work. And these are just a few of the many images that I have created so far, and I'm in the process of making more images to address this issue. These are just a few of the names that I mentioned today. And I want to make note that I'm telling this perspective from the male perspective because I am a black man, but that is not the only perspective that is part of the story. Breonna Taylor, she has been killed in this year, in 2020, and there's no justice for her yet. I don't have an image for her yet, but she is just one of many stories. Sandra Bland, who was killed in Texas. There are a lot of individuals, And I think we need to open our eyes. We need to wake up, and we need to stand up, as we have been doing recently, and continue to stand up until something happens, until change happens. So yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this work. I hope that it made you think. I hope that it made you look at this issue and want to research this issue a little bit more. So yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. You can go to my website, send me an email, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you for listening.